Welcome to Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower our music, and legendary icon in the music industry. Another week, another great episode from love songs to last tracks. What happened to romance in pop? Valentine's Day Part 1.
Yes, the radio plays differently now. In case you hadn't known that when her grandparents fell in love, where Nat King
Mhm.
Cole once crooned about unforgettable moments that lingered like a song of love that clings to me. Today's charts pulse with tracks like NLE's Choppa's Slut Me Out, a title that would have been unthinkable on broadcast airways even 30 years ago. This shift represents more than just a change in taste or generational rebellion. It reflects a fundamental rewiring of how we understand desire, commitment, and the very architecture of romantic connection. What happened between the era when love songs dominated popular music and our current landscape of hookup anthems? More importantly, what did we lose when the soundtrack of courtship transformed from patient longing into instant gratification?
Indeed, instant. Nowadays,
Mhm.
we want instant. When we think about classic love songs from the 50s through the 70s, we're talking about massive cultural phenomena, Mr. Mix. Songs that defined entire generations' understanding of romance. But you are arguing this were not just entertainment. What were they actually doing to listeners' brains?
These songs functioned as what I call formative practices, repeated experiences that literally shape neural pathways around romantic behavior. Dr. Daniel Levitin's research in This Is Your Brain on Music demonstrates that music activates the brain's reward circuitry more powerful than almost any other stimulus. When teenagers played Unforgettable on repeat, and they did, helping it hold the number one spot for 5 consecutive weeks, they weren't just enjoying a melody. They were training their dopamine systems to associate romantic satisfaction with patience, longing, and the promise of enduring connection. Consider the marked musical architecture of Nat King Cole's masterpiece, my parents' favorite singer. The song opens with that iconic piano introduction, establishing a mood of elegant restraint before Cole's voice enters. His phrasing embodies what the neuroscience reveals about delayed gratification. He stretches syllables, lets silence breathe between phrases, builds tension that resolves not in explosive release, but in gentle, assured satisfaction. That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too. The grammatical complexity alone, a subordinate clause nested within the main statement, demands active listening. Your brain must hold multiple ideas simultaneously, anticipate the resolution, and experience the pleasure of that anticipation being fulfilled. Dr. Anna Rose Childress at the University of Pennsylvania has studied how anticipation creates stronger neural responses than immediate reward. Classic love songs weaponize a neurological reality in the best sense. They taught millions of young people that romantic satisfaction lived in the yearning, in the courtship, in the slow dance toward commitment rather than its consumption. Compare this to contemporary tracks optimized for streaming algorithms and TikTok virality. Drake's Hotline Bling, which spent an impressive 10 weeks at number two on the Billboard Hot 100, operates on entirely different neurological principles. The song's hook arrives within 12 seconds. Its melodic phrases are short, repetitive, designed for instant recognition and shareability. Lyrically, it chronicles not patient longing, but possessive anxiety. You used to call me on my cell phone late night when you need my love. The relationship exists in retrospect, already failed, but defined by transactional attentions and availability rather than transcendent connection. What's fascinating from a neuroscience perspective is how these structural differences train different behavioral patterns. Dr. Eli Finkel's longitudinal research at Northwestern University on relationship formation shows that couples who engage in what he calls courtship behaviors, extended periods of getting to know each other, delayed physical intimacy, Investment in shared experiences before commitment reports significantly higher relationship satisfaction decades later. Classic love songs provided the soundtrack for exactly these behaviors. They normalized waiting, they made patience sexy, they trained young brains to experience the approach to commitment as the most dopamine rich phase of romance. Contemporary tracks do the opposite. They compress timelines, celebrate intimacy, and treat relationships as consumable experiences. This isn't moral panic or nostalgia. It's recognition that the soundtrack of courtship trains neurological responses to desire. In conclusion, classic love songs weren't passive entertainment. They were active training programs for neural pathways that supported long term pair bonding, and their disappearance from our charts represents a profound shift in how we're wiring young brains to understand desire.
Mr. Mick, let's ground this in specifics. You've analyzed chart performance across decades. What did the actual data reveal about how dominant these themes were during what you call the golden age?
Well, the numbers are staggering and they demolish any notion that I'm cherry picking examples. From 1955 through 1979, love songs about commitment, longing, and enduring connection didn't just appear on the charts, they dominated them with a totality we can barely imagine today. In 1956, Elvis Presley's Love Me Tender sat atop the Billboard charts for 5 weeks, a ballad so gentle and commitment oriented that it's almost jarring to remember this was Elvis, the supposed danger to American youth. The song's bridge, "For My Darling, I Love You and I Always Will," makes an explicit and unambiguous promise of permanence. That's what topped the charts in the rock and roll era. Jump to 1962, the Shirelles' Soldier Boy, which held number one for 3 weeks, tells the story of women waiting faithfully for a boyfriend to return from military service. "I'll be true to you," she promises, and the song's entire emotional architecture celebrates this fidelity as romantic rather than restrictive. Or consider Sam Cooke's You Send Me, which maintained number one for 3 weeks in 1957. The song's most repeated phrase, "You Send Me," captures transcendent desire without any physical specificity. Cooke articulates being overwhelmed by someone's presence, describing romantic love as something that happens to you, transforms you, and sends you beyond yourself. The pattern holds across genres. In the soul realm, we have Otis Redding's Sitting on the Dock of the Bay becoming a posthumous number one hit in 1968, a meditation on loneliness and longing so profound that even its non romantic elements feel romantic. In pop, the Beatles' Hey Jude spent 9 weeks at number one in 1968, a song that, while ostensibly about consoling a child, operates musically and emotionally as a love song to the act of emotional support itself. Its 7 minute length and patient na 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 coda, training listeners to find satisfaction in extended musical experiences rather than instant hooks. Even when songs got more physically suggestive in the early 70s, they maintained this commitment framework. Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On, which spent 2 weeks at number one in 1973, is often misremembered as purely sexual. But listen to the actual lyrics. "I've been really trying, baby, trying to hold back this feeling for so long." The song acknowledges extended courtship, restraint finally giving way to intimacy within the context of an established connection. Compare this to, say, Nicki Minaj's Anaconda from 2014, which peaked at number two and operates in a completely different erotic universe, one where physical encounters have no narrative context, no buildup, no suggested continuation beyond the moment. What's crucial is that these classic songs weren't niche products for sentimental audiences. They were the mainstream. They were what teenagers played at proms and adults played at weddings and radio stations played in heavy rotation. The chart data also reveals how songs function within courtship itself. Many of these tracks became cultural shorthand, asking someone to dance to Unchained Melody, which the Righteous Brothers took to number four in 1965, communicated specific intentions and expectations. The long running time meant extended physical proximity during slow dancing. The lyrics' emphasis on longing and waiting signaled the seriousness of purpose. Playing this song for someone or with someone was a speech act that carried meaning beyond the music itself. By contrast, when I analyze contemporary chart performance, I find virtually no songs in the top 10 over the past decade that celebrate committed love as these classics did. The Weeknd's Blinding Lights, the biggest hit of 2020 with 24 weeks at number one, sonically recalls 80s synth pop, but lyrically describes a desperate, potentially toxic attraction. I can't sleep until I feel your touch. It's not about building toward commitment, it's about addiction like craving for someone's presence. In conclusion, the chart dominance of commitment oriented love songs from 1955 to 1979 wasn't an accident or a niche phenomenon. It represented a complete cultural consensus about romantic ideals, one that has since fragmented entirely.
Indeed, Mr. Meg. So we've established what existed before. When exactly this shift happened? What is the gradual or sudden?
The transformation began in the early 1990s and accelerated dramatically after 2000, driven by technological changes that rewired both music consumption and production. I can pinpoint the early warning signs with precision. In 1992, Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back spent 5 weeks at number one. A novelty track, sure, but one whose entire premise was objectification of women's bodies with zero romantic context. This would have been commercially unthinkable a decade earlier, yet it became a cultural phenomenon, memorized by children and played at school dances. The tracks that achieved massive commercial success increasingly celebrated casual encounters over commitment. Then came digital music distribution, and everything accelerated. Streaming services amplified these pressures exponentially. Social media sealed the transformation. But technology alone doesn't explain the content shift. Cultural changes around sexuality and relationships were equally important. Look at the data. In 2009, the Black Eyed Peas' I Got a Feeling spent 14 weeks at number one, celebrating nightlife and partying with zero romantic depth. In 2013, Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines, despite or because of its controversial content, spent 12 weeks at number one, treating sexual encounters as conquest to be pursued aggressively. In 2017, Luis Fonsi's Despacito spent 16 weeks at number one, a song whose title means slowly, but whose lyrics are explicitly about physical seduction, not emotional connection. The COVID 19 pandemic added another layer. Lockdown isolation drove music consumption through streaming and TikTok to unprecedented levels. You couldn't slow dance at prom in 2020 and 2021, so songs designed for that function stopped making commercial sense. In conclusion, the shift from love songs to hookup anthems occurred over roughly 15 years, 1995 to 2010, driven by converging technological changes in music distribution, cultural shifts in dating norms, and economic pressures that rewarded different song structures, creating a feedback loop that has now completely transformed the sonic landscape of romance.
Interesting, Mr. Meg. So you use some theological language in your analysis, particularly this phrase, the incarnation of logic. What do you mean by that, and what does theology have to do with the pop music?
I realize that might sound pretentious, but hear me out. The concept is crucial. Incarnational logic in Christian theology refers to the idea that the divine becomes physically present, that transcendent meaning inhabits material reality. God doesn't remain abstract. In the incarnation, deity takes flesh, enters time and space, and becomes tangible. This pattern, transcendence made immanent, the eternal entering the temporal, describes exactly what classic love songs accomplish with romantic desire. Nat King Cole treats a specific person as containing something beyond themselves, something that transcends physical presence, though near or far, yet remains anchored in the particular encounter with them. This person becomes a sacrament, an outward sign of inward grace, a physical reality that mediates transcendent experience. The musical structures reinforce this. Take the bridge in Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers. Time goes by so slowly, and time can do so much. Are you still mine? Bobby Hatfield's vocal performance here, reaching those high notes, voice straining with the effort, physically embodies longing that transcends the moment. The time stretching out, the uncertainty, the question, are you still mine? Treats the beloved as anchoring meaning across temporal distance. The person matters not just for what they provide now, but for how they order your entire experience of time itself. Cardi B's WAP featuring Megan Thee Stallion, which peaked at number one for 4 weeks in 2020, exemplifies a contemporary approach. I'm not clutching pearls about explicit content. I'm noting that the song treats sexual encounters as a consumable experiences divorced from any transcendent dimension. Bodies meet bodies, appetites get satisfied. That's the beginning and end of it. Or consider Post Malone's Circles, which spent 20 weeks in the top 10 in 2019, 2020. It's actually one of the more emotionally substantive contemporary hits, acknowledging relationship failure and cyclical dysfunction. But even here, the framing is individualistic. I'm going through the motions. Relationships are things that happen to you, patterns you're trapped in, problems to be managed or escaped. Classic love songs train collective orientation. They presented courtship as creating something together, a shared world, a mutual story, a connection that became more than the sum of its parts. In conclusion, what I call incarnational logic, treating romantic love as mediating transcendent meaning through particular relationships, structured classic love songs musically and lyrically, while contemporary tracks largely abandon this framework for transactional, individualistic approaches that treat relationships as consumable experiences rather than transformative commitments.
Mr. Malik, you use some theological language in your analysis, particularly this phrase, well, incarn- incarnational logics. So let's get back to the brain science. You've cited researchers like Dr. Anna Rose Childress and Dr. Daniel Lefton. What does the neuroscience actually reveal about what happens when courtships practices change?
The research is remarkably clear and somewhat alarming. Dr. Anna Rose Childress's work at the University of Pennsylvania Brain Behavior Laboratory uses MRI imaging to study desire and anticipation. Her key finding, the brain's dopamine response peaks not during reward consumption, but during anticipation of reward. This is counterintuitive. We assume satisfaction comes from getting what we want, but neurologically, the most intense pleasure comes from wanting, approaching, anticipating. This has profound implications for courtship. Extended courtship periods, which classic love songs both soundtracked and normalize, create sustained dopamine elevation. You're anticipating connection, building toward commitment, experiencing desire's approach phase over weeks or months. Each phone call, the kind that hotline bling nostalgically recalls but doesn't model, each date, each slow dance to unforgettable, activates reward circuitry while maintaining tension that hasn't yet resolved. Your brain learns to associate romantic satisfaction with this extended anticipation. Contemporary hookup culture, by contrast, compresses or eliminates the anticipation phase. Apps like Tinder create what psychologists call choice overload, abundant options that paradoxically reduce satisfaction because they prevent deep investment in any particular choice. When you can swipe to a new option in seconds, your brain never builds the sustained anticipation that Childress's research shows creates the most powerful dopamine responses. You get immediate consumption, but miss the neurological jackpot of extended desire. Dr. Daniel Levitin's research in This Is Your Brain on Music reveals another crucial dimension. Musical experiences shape neural plasticity. Repeated exposure to particular musical structures literally rewires how your brain processes reward, emotion, and social bonding. Think about what this means. Adolescents who listened repeatedly to Unforgettable or Unchained Melody, playing them dozens or hundreds of times during formative years, were literally wiring their brains to associate romantic reward with patience, longing, and commitment. The musical structures reinforce the delay of gratification. The lyrical content normalized transcendent desire. The act of slow dancing to these songs created embodied experiences where physical intimacy, dancing close, occurred within frameworks of public commitment, asking someone to dance, and extended courtship. The 6 minute song demands sustained engagement. Contemporary music creates different wiring. Songs optimized for TikTok virality, with hooks arriving within 15 seconds and entire tracks rarely exceeding 3 minutes, train brains for rapid consumption. The lyrical focus on immediate physical gratification normalizes treating romantic encounters as consumable experiences. Levinton's research suggests these aren't neural differences, they're literally shaping how developing brains construct towards reward circuits around romantic desire. Well, today's teenagers listen to tracks like Slut Me Out or Sexy Red's catalog on repeat. They're not just enjoying catchy beats, they're receiving repeated messages about how relationships work, what sex means, and what they should want and expect. These messages contradict the incarnational logic that classic love songs communicated. They train different neural pathways, normalize different behaviors, and shape different expectations. Perhaps most concerning is research on what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, our tendency to return to baseline happiness levels regardless of positive life changes. In conclusion, neuroscience reveals that music doesn't just reflect cultural change, it actively shapes neural development, particularly during adolescence. And contemporary music's compression of courtship timelines and celebration of immediate gratification may be training brains less capable of the sustained anticipation and deep commitment that research shows support long term relationship satisfaction.
Mr. Mig, beyond individual brain chemistry, what are the broader cultural consequences of this shift? What have we lost collectively?
We've lost a shared language for transcendent desire. This might sound abstract, but it has concrete effects on how communities understand and support romantic relationships. Today's musical fragmentation means there's no contemporary equivalent, no universally known love song that articulates commitment oriented ideals. The closest might be Ed Sheeran's Thinking Out Loud, which did achieve massive commercial success. But even these exist in an ecosystem where they're balanced by or arguably overwhelmed by tracks celebrating hookup culture. In 1964, hookup anthems didn't exist on the charts. The monoculture had problems, but it created shared understanding. In the classic era, asking someone to dance to a slow song was a legible social script. It communicated intentions, it created public accountability. Your friends saw you dancing close, which raised the stakes, which created pressure for seriousness. The music provided the excuse for physical proximity while the public setting maintained appropriate boundaries. It was a brilliant social technology for navigating the complex territory between attraction and commitment. We've also lost musical spaces for articulating complex romantic emotions. Contemporary hits tend toward emotional simplicity. You want someone, you're angry at someone, you're celebrating being single. The nuanced territory, that longing for someone absent, uncertainty about whether they reciprocate, hope mixed with fear, rarely appears in the current top 40. This doesn't mean people don't experience these emotions. It means they lack the cultural vocabulary to name and share them. The loss of public courtship rituals matters too. When relationships form in private and music consumption is similarly private, streaming through earbuds, there's less community scaffolding supporting relationship formation and maintenance. Dr. Eli Finkel's research shows that contemporary young adults report simultaneously wanting deep connection while being terrified of commitment and poor at the communication skills that maintain relationships. They've been trained by culture, including music, to value independence, avoid vulnerability, and keep options open. Classic love songs model the opposite: interdependence, emotional openness, and choosing one person completely. That modeling was formative for millions of people who then created more stable families and communities. But we can acknowledge those gains while still recognizing something valuable was lost. We could have inclusive, diverse music that still treats romantic love as potentially transcendent rather than purely transactional. We could have songs that celebrate commitment without assuming traditional gender roles. The fact that we've abandoned incarnational logic and embraced purely consumerist approaches to relationship isn't necessarily progress. It's a particular choice that has cost we're only beginning to recognize. There's also emerging research on loneliness. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy declared loneliness a public health epidemic in 2023. Young adults report unprecedented levels of isolation despite or because of digital connectivity. Could the loss of cultural scripts for deep romantic connections contribute? When music trains you to keep relationships casual, avoid vulnerability, maintain independence, you might achieve sexual experience but miss the profound knowing that classic courtship practices facilitated. The cultural consequences of losing commitment oriented love songs include fragmented shared language around romance, loss of public courtship rituals and community support for relationship formation, lack of cultural vocabulary for complex romantic emotions, and possibly contributing to rising loneliness and declining marriage rates. In conclusion, we should acknowledge that the classic era's music reinforced norms we should not have abandoned.
This all sounds rather pessimistic, Mr. Meg. Is there any path forward? Can we reclaim some of what made classic love songs neurologically or culturally formative without returning to the problematic elements of that era?
I think we can, but it requires intentionality rather than just market forces. The encouraging news is that the neuroscience works in both directions. If music shaped brains towards hookup culture, different music can reshape them back toward commitment. Neuroplasticity continues through adulthood, though it's most pronounced during adolescence. We're not locked into whatever wiring we've developed from years of streaming hookup anthems. First, individual action. People can curate their own musical environments. If you're serious about developing capacity for long term romantic commitment, regularly listen to music that models patience, emotional complexity, and transcendent desire will help. This isn't nostalgia, it's using neuroscience intentionally. Create playlists mixing classic love songs with contemporary artists who work in that tradition. Leon Bridges' Coming Home album, for instance, deliberately evokes 60s soul while offering contemporary production. Adele's catalog, whatever its other qualities, treats love with the seriousness and emotional depth that characterize classic eras. These aren't perfect replicas, but they share DNA with what came before. For parents, be intentional about the music your children encounter during adolescent years. I'm not suggesting censorship or moral panic, just recognition that repeated exposure to particular musical messages shapes developing brains. If you want your teenagers developing neural pathways that support long term commitment, make sure they're regularly hearing music that models that. Play classic love songs in the car. Make family playlists that include substantive romantic music. Talk about lyrics and what different songs teach about relationships. For artists and industry, there's actually a market opportunity here. A significant portion of the population, particularly those who've experienced the emptiness of hookup culture, are hungry for music articulating deeper romantic connection. Artists who can create contemporary sounds while treating love with transcendence and seriousness could find devoted audiences. The streaming model actually enables this because you don't need blockbuster hits, you need dedicated fans who listen repeatedly. A thousand true fans works better than viral moments for building sustainable artistic careers. We need new courtship rituals that incorporate what we've learned about neuroscience and relationships. This doesn't mean returning to 50s dating scripts wholesale, but we could create contemporary practices that achieve similar neurological effects: extended courtship periods, public community involvement in relationship formation, music that rewards patient listening rather than just instant hooks. What might that look like? Maybe dance events specifically designed for slow dancing to thoughtful music, community gatherings where people meet face to face rather than on apps, social pressure, the gentle kind, toward making intentions clear and following through on commitments. Educational institutions could help. What if relationship education in schools included teaching about the neuroscience of anticipation and delayed gratification? What if young adults learn that the most intense romantic satisfaction comes not from immediate consumption, but from extended courtship? This isn't abstinence education or moral instruction. It's sharing empirical research about how brains work and letting people make informed choices. There are opportunities in the wedding culture. Weddings remain one of the few spaces where classic love songs still dominate. Couples consistently choose classic songs for first dances. This suggests hunger for that transcendent romantic language at key moments. We can expand that impulse beyond weddings into broader relationship culture. Faith communities can play a role too, which connects to my earlier theological language. Religious traditions have always understood that romantic love can mediate transcendent experience. Sacramental marriage isn't just a legal contract, it's a means of grace, a way that commitment to another person opens you to divine presence. Communities that maintain this understanding can model it for the wider culture. Whether you share the theological framework or not, the practical wisdom that committed love creates opportunities for profound transformation remain valid. I'm also cautiously optimistic about generational backlash. There are early signs that Gen Z, having grown up entirely within hookup culture and finding it often disappointing, is questioning those norms. Articles about dating app fatigue, increased interest in mute cutes, and old fashioned courtship, even the trad wife phenomenon, problematic as it is in some expressions, suggest a hunger for alternatives to the hyper individualistic transactional approach that dominated for 20 years. Music could lead this shift. If we get artists with genuine talent creating contemporary music that treats love with the depth and transcendence of classic eras while avoiding outdated gender norms and embracing diverse relationship models, those artists could reshape cultural expectations. The music industry follows money. If there's demand for substance of love songs, someone will supply them. Finally, we can trace spaces online and offline where people committed to richer romantic possibilities can find each other and build community. Subcultures matter. They preserve and transmit values even when mainstream culture moves elsewhere. If enough people commit to incarnational approaches to love, soundtracked by music that reinforces patience and transcendence, those communities can sustain and eventually influence broader culture. While we've lost the universal cultural dominance of commitment oriented love songs, we can recover the universal cultural, neurological, and relational benefits through intentional individual choices, new courtship rituals incorporating scientific insights, educational efforts, artistic creation, and building communities committed to treating romantic love as potentially transcendent rather than purely transactional. In conclusion, we should consider embracing the genuine progress towards classic love music that contemporary media often dismisses. And I want to wrap up just a little, Daniel. And what you're able to do is to summarize what we had in this episode.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mac, for doing that. Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Mac. From love songs to last tracks, what happened to romance and pop? The Valentine's or this Valentine's Day, it's worth asking how pop music shifted from show burning love songs that spoke of longing, devotion, and emotional vulnerability to tracks driven by instant gratification and surface level desire. Mr. Meg, would you like to plug in something?
I appreciate the opportunity. Write the book, grow the business. Connect with me on LinkedIn. GMIC, the Doctor of Digital Smith, PhD. Listen to the Doctor of Digital podcast. Pick up a couple volumes I have on Amazon. That is On Track, Ian Hunter, and Burning America. And if you love music, then support true fans.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Meg, the Doctor Digital, and please do listen to other podcasts that we are doing together. Music 101 for sure, and Mental Health 101, Love Letters, and Sex 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Meg, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend. Until next time, Deus Volt.
Bodycom people, see you soon.